Kagurabachi Chapter 104 is here, and it is a doozy. But for anybody who is here, I am actually a few weeks behind on my deep dives. So I will be starting off with Chapter 102 and going to 104. Now, I will have timestamps below so that if you want to just cut to the chase and shoot on right over to 104, it'll just be down below for you. Otherwise, I'm not going to take too much time here yapping. I'm already behind. So let's just get right into it. Chapter 102 opens up after Shiba has teleported Yura outside of the Kaminabi headquarters. He's floating up in the air above Samura and Chihiro, and their dialogue begins where Samura is asking or stating that Yura has changed quite a bit. Their course has changed quite a bit because the last time he had spoken with them was the plan of operation was to hunt down each individual contracted sword bearer and take them out. But they basically rolled the dice and went for this invasion of the headquarters instead. So that's what Samura is referring to here. And Yura even answers like, yeah, but just in case, and rightly so, because he's points out the fact that you've changed your mind too, Samura, and quite significantly, because we knew where Samura's intentions lied with his philosophy and what he believed to be the best use for the enchanted blades and everything with their past. And he was taking on the responsibility to make sure that the swords could no longer do any further damage, and that's why he was on his solo mission to basically kill all the sword bearers and resurrect them with Suzaku immediately, but breaking their eternal contract so that the swords could be basically taken away. And so that's why he was cooperating with the Hishaku, because that's essentially kind of what they were doing. But then there was going to come to a fight at the end of that, but he was totally prepared for that situation. So obviously Chihiro is the one who changed Samura's mind through the powers of the N10 and the possibility that the enchanted blades could actually be destroyed rather than sealed. So it gave a more permanent solution that Samura now agrees is the most feasible way, and the way that people do not need to die in the process. So he's here supporting Chihiro, and they're trying to obviously prevent what the Hishaku are now trying to do. And Yura just says, like, did you see a different future? And Samura's like, yes. And this is where Yura even opens up saying that he's changed his mind as well. He spoke with him, referring to the Swordmaster. And he points out how Samura obviously must have known him well. They fought together in the war. They were both close to Kunishige. And, he just goes on to say that they believed that he lost his mind and released the malediction, and that he was overwhelmed by the sword's power and he lost his control, and it was just an accident, and that he didn't mean to do it. And he's just like, well, we can drop all that now, because obviously from speaking with the Swordmaster, we know he was fully aware of his actions. He's fully cognizant. The Magatsumi did not take over him, and he did not lose control. He made the choice to release the malediction 100% based off his own principles and values and what he believed in and what he thought was protecting the country. Now, we don't know the full extent of the island of Shikoku, its residents, what actually played out. We're still in the dark about the actual events that transpired. I'm still very hopeful for a Seitei War flashback, because that would also give an opportunity to see some of the other characters and other sword bearers. We could see Uraha when he was wielding the Kumayuri. We can see um, oh, why am I drawing a blank on him? Natsuki's older brother, Ibuki. Yeah, Misaka. We can see him wielding the Cloud Gouger. It would just be really, really cool to see. And obviously, it gives great context to what actually was occurring that led to the Swordmaster believing that his actions were justified, maybe even righteous, even. And it was for a greater purpose to protect the people of Japan. But regardless, I mean, I'm just looking forward to it. But he states that he intends to bring the Swordmaster back. And then he begins to point out, this is like internal dialogue, that he says that the Swordmaster has completely stopped encroaching upon his body, which this was something that I had talked about. I believe it was in the previous video where we saw just such a tiny little portion of the Magatsumi's power when Kyora was wielding it. Like, he couldn't unsheath it whatsoever, and he was, through just force of will, resisting the Swordmaster and the invasion and encroachment upon his body. And Yura was at first as well, but then the Swordmaster stopped because he wanted to have a conversation with Yura to see what exactly was going on, and just because he hasn't talked to somebody in so long. And he wanted to kind of like see it play out. But now here, he's giving Yura, and which is what I was worried about, he's giving Yura the opportunity against two worthy opponents to demonstrate his beliefs, demonstrate where he stands in this entire situation. And this is just where it gets really scary, because even just a teensy little bit of the Magatsumi's power wielded by Kyora, a total novice, was incredible. He was able to fight against Chihiro and Hiyuki with Flamebone at the same time. Now, there's a lot of asterisks around that. Obviously not full power, like not a Chihiro who's as strong as he is now, a Hiyuki who was still only using what appeared to be the right hand of Flamebone. You know, we didn't see Spinal Column. We didn't see the whole release of what exactly that power is. So there's some asterisks there. But regardless, it was incredibly powerful. And Yura is someone who is far more proficient when it comes to combat from everything we've seen so far. And then now on top of it, he can wield more of the Magatsumi's power because the Swordmaster is not encroaching. He's allowing him to use it. He can't draw it still. The blade can seemingly only be drawn by the Swordmaster, but still it's going to result in a huge power boost. I mean, we already saw it a little bit when he was inside the headquarters, and this probably is going to be even worse. So he goes on to say that the malediction was not an accident. It was one man's deliberate action. He wielded the power for his country, and now that absolute power that the Shinichi or Magatsumi brings should be used to bring order to the chaotic world. In that Kunishige Rokuhira was wrong. He made the wrong choice by taking away the blades, sealing them up, not using them after the war. Yura is firmly on the other side of that they need to wield it in order to take control of the chaos. And you can only do that with absolute power, even though that would lead to tyranny. That's exactly what tyranny is. You just rule with an iron fist. No one can oppose you. That leads to very bad situations as well. But, you know, we got to come to find out why Yura believes the things that he does, and why does he believe that this is the solution. So this is where the three-way battle truly begins, because Samura is just like, this stops here. And I got to point out the fact Chihiro hasn't even uttered a single word. He hasn't uttered a single word to Yura. And the last time they interacted was back at the Rakuzaichi, and had Chihiro all sorts of messed up and was very emotional. But now Chihiro is just here. He's locked. He's so utterly focused on this battle that he hasn't said a word. He doesn't care what Yura's motivations are. He is just ready to get down to business. And this is where we see one of Tobimune's crow feathers on one side of Yura, and then the black goldfish from the N10 on the other side of Yura. And then boom, both Chihiro and Samura teleport using crow. Chihiro's using obviously Akka, red, that he absorbed the abilities of crow to teleport. So now they both teleport to both sides of Yura, and they're both going for an EI white purity strike. But this is where Yura has a quick flashback that we get to see a destroyed house, and he's got bloodied clothes, but we don't see anything else. But then we see the word centipede, and we see the centipede spirit energy circulate all around them as the blade clinks. He clinks it back into the sheath, and then boom, sends out the shockwaves. We see Samura's glasses crack, some blood spill from his mouth, and he comments that it's a similar power to the Swordmaster that he commanded 18 years ago. And the description of the centipede ability says that it instantly takes the shockwaves that rack his body, so presumably Yura or who's ever wielding it, it's like building up a reverberation inside the body, and then it expels it in an instant in an omnidirectional shockwaves that can reach people up to 300 meters away. That's a huge radius. That is a ginormous radius for this ability. And then it cuts to explaining that Samura can see them. He can see the shockwaves. And after losing his vision previously through his own choice, that his other four senses developed to like superhuman levels, but now his vision that it's returned resides at the top of that pedestal. So he sees everything. And he can see the people who are about to die. So he's looking away from Yura to those people who are about to lose their life because they're inside this little cafe, and he's turned to save them while Yura waits for his opening. He's waiting for that opportunity because he knows Samura's nature as a person and how compassionate he is. But this is where we have the goat Shiba. He's all of a sudden inside this cafe, and he's just pointing to Samura, telling him to focus. And he proceeds to just, within milliseconds, just starts teleporting all of these civilians out of this cafe before the shockwaves even come in. It's a super cool panel because you see the glass start to break, but Shiba is like, you see people disappearing with each panel, but then the cracks grow bigger on the glass before they're shattering the window. And then we even see like the cup of tea that the person was drinking begins to shatter as well, but now they're gone. So love this dynamic action movement. I mean, this is just something that Hokuzono does exceedingly well, is action and their paneling. So really awesome. Shiba's just coming in clutch here because he's trying to give. He also knows how Samura is. And he says that he's thinking to himself, like, those eyes of yours are a liability because now you see all of the people who can be affected by your battle right now. So he'll evacuate everyone. So you focus on what you need to see, which what you need to see is Yura. It's the opponent in front of you that is wielding extremely dangerous power. And it's also to focus to see the other man before him, who is wrecked flesh and bone by the same shockwaves, yet his bloodthirsty gaze never wavers from his foe as he readies his sword. And this is our boy Chihiro. He's still in position from when the shockwaves went out. So he just took that, stood his ground, and Samura remembers Chihiro's words saying that I'll destroy the Shinichi I need you to use your powers to heal the injuries I'm going to incur. Because Chihiro is not one to feign away from taking damage, putting his body on the line. As long as he can continue to strive towards his goal, he's going to stay focused in that regard. And this is where Samura initiates Suzaku. We see the flames basically skitter across the ground, light Chihiro up, begin healing him, and the flames of mercy reached him faster than Yura's follow-up blow, and it gave him a foothold for his decisive strike. And he is just thinking back, Chihiro is thinking to himself about the 200,000 people that were massacred on Shikoku, including children. And he's thinking back on Shiba telling him how his father was consumed by regret for forging the enchanted blades, because indirectly he felt the weight of what happened, because his creations led to the death of all of those innocent people. And Chihiro just says that he will not let that happen. And he goes for a strike, but Yura manages to block it with the Magatsumi, and Chihiro tells him that this ends right here and now. And this is where chapter 102 ends. We get a quick little snippet of the Swordmaster, just kind of, I'm sure he's somehow observing the situation about what's going on up there. So this is where 102 ends. I'm going to waste no time and just get right into chapter 103. The 103 opens back up with the clash between the N10 and the Magatsumi. He manages to, Yura kind of parries or kind of pushes Chihiro off of him and says like, well, this ends here, you say, where he is saying that today it finally begins. And he points the Magatsumi at Chihiro and just says, Dragonfly. But then Chihiro, as he's like kind of falling back, is activating Kuro. So he's going to send out his slashing spirit energy attack to try to counteract the blow of Dragonfly. And they simultaneously attack, but Chihiro gets sent packing, which this is just crazy though, because Chihiro at this point is a very proficient enchanted blade user. I don't know if I would categorize him as a master. I don't think he's there yet, but he is still exceptionally skilled and powerful. And a Dragonfly, yes, it's from the Magatsumi, but this is a Magatsumi that is not drawn. This is a Magatsumi that is not being wielded by its actual contracted master. And it was enough to not only counteract the Kuro, but still send Chihiro flying into the buildings. So it's just becoming extremely clear that the Magatsumi, they've reiterated it, but it truly is a next level enchanted blade. So I'm not exactly sure how we're going to overcome that outside of pure numbers, kind of similar to how the previous 5 enchanted blade users were able to team up to capture the Swordmaster. So I'm seeing a similar situation in the future need to happen. But as Chihiro is flying through the building, we see a crow feather end up right behind him. Samura immediately teleports right behind him to stop his momentum. And Samura starts beginning to like have some internal monologue saying that Yura isn't contracted to the blade. He's only commanding the powers of it indirectly. And if he kills him, it'll resolve the battle with the Shinichi, but the Swordmaster is a whole other issue. But it can at least get the Magatsumi rendered dormant again. So Yura is crashing into the building to follow up with another attack with a swing, because we know all the way back in the Rakuzaichi that even with the sheath, when Chihiro was clashing with it, with Kiora, it made a metal on metal, like the blade is drawn. But this is the sheath. But the sheath, the sword within the sheath can actually still cut things, which is just crazy. And Chihiro just thinks to himself that Yura is incredibly strong. But then we see another feather right behind Yura. Samura teleports behind him using Crow, goes for an attack, but Yura, in this really awesome dynamic panel, somehow like dodges to the floor while also countering with his own sword behind him and actually cuts Samura on the cheek. And this is where Chihiro thinks to himself that Yura has always had great reflexes, but like this is something else entirely. Now we've totally stepped into a different realm here. And he even witnesses the fact that his wounds, Yura's wounds, are healing automatically. And this is where we finally get some Magatsumi lore, the enchanted blade. It says that the Magatsumi enchanted blade affects vitality. So stealing it from others, giving it to its master, its powers elevate all activities associated with vitality. So where this, kind of goes for me, it's like everything physical with the physical body. So we're talking strength, speed, your perception, reflexes, healing. It just encompasses so much energy. And the fact that it can leech those things from other people means you essentially have an infinite supply of power, which makes sense why this sword is so ridiculous. And this is still, again, unsheathed. So we haven't actually truly seen what this thing can do. So that's going to be a sight to behold, certainly. But I always kind of assumed that was kind of what was going on with the flowers, because the flowers would embed themselves in people. And if it would embed in sorcerers, it didn't outright kill them, but it seemed to incapacitate them. And now it makes sense because it was essentially sucking the vitality out of those people. And that's why when it's used on normal people who aren't sorcerers, it just outright kills them. So then we see Yura, Samura, and Chihiro, boom, 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 blowing up the levels of this building in this awesome shot from the outside. And then they are up above. They come up onto a different level. Both Samura and Chihiro are cloaked in the flames of Suzaku, so they are constantly healing, as well as Yura. And Chihiro thinks to himself that Yura doesn't seem to be in agony like Kiora was, and that he's using powers that they have not seen yet. And he's getting closer and closer. And Samura thinks apparently he can't unsheath it, but to what extent can he use its powers? And he then thinks, well, he's hearing, because Samura still has supersonic hearing. So he's actually hearing Shiba, because we see Shiba here just running and just teleporting. Looks really awesome. Shiba, I don't know what it is about Shiba, but he just always looks cool. And the fact that he's this teleport master, I don't know. It's just, I love seeing Shiba on the panel. I love seeing the little kind of rectangles that fly after him, because it almost seems like he's glitching. I know that was a very good glitch noise. So don't give me too hard of a time for that. But he's saying that at this scale, at the abilities that Yura is demonstrating, even while Shiba is evacuating people as fast as possible, it's only a matter of time before there are casualties. And so he surmises, or just basically yells out to Chihiro, that they need to wrap this up quickly. But this is where we see Yura place the blade down on the ground and he says, "Spider." Now, we haven't seen Spider since Kyora used it one time back at the Rakuzaichi. And this was the one that it's an immobilization power, like you're stuck in a spider's web. You're the insect and you're stuck in the web. And Chihiro kind of thinks back on it. He was able to just outright dodge it back in the Rakuzaichi because it, was a small area that had a bit of a time lag for when it activated. So he was able to kind of get out of there. But this one is larger than the entire building. And it was able to lock both of them down. But it says that because both Samura and Chihiro were cloaked in the flames of mercy from Suzaku, the effect is nullified in less than a second. But Yura says that's plenty of time. And I just want to point out the fact that this is crazy. The spider ability, this is crazy. Because you have two Enchanted Blade users that are, and Samura for sure, is one of the most powerful sword masters in the entire series. And this was able to lock him down while having Suzaku activated. So Suzaku made it so it was only effective for less than a second. But it's like, is there any way to actually defend against this, to stop it? Or is dodging the only possibility? But with seeing the area of effect on it, when used at a higher scale, it seems impossible to dodge. And if they weren't cloaked in the Flames of Mercy, how long would they have actually been immobilized? Because anybody else that didn't have that, that's plenty of time for Yura to just take them out completely. Because he even says that less than a second is plenty of time. And we know in anime, time kind of moves a little weird. But when characters of this level are fighting at this speed, it truly is, they're fighting on like milliseconds, which is just crazy. And he actually is able to hit Samura with a dragonfly. Samura was able to block it, but it still sends him out the building, crashing across multiple roofs and flying into a train car on the subway. But Yura, immediately as Samura has landed and he's using Suzaku to heal, Yura is already in the train car wielding Dragonfly again. And Samura thinks to himself, like, he's fast. But Samura also notices, because of his incredible senses, he notices that there are people right behind him outside of the train. And then we see Shiba come back. We see him on the train and he says, "I emptied out that car, hurry up and finish him. Like, I told you, I got these people, get back to the job at hand, dude." He's just telling him to lock in again. And this is where we then see Samura, you see the crow feathers start to encase both him and Yura. And we see the narration say that the Tobimune's power, the flames of universal mercy, are originally intended to heal its master. So only Samura. But with Samura's true realm and his ascension, he's able to apply them to even objects. So one, it extended outside of his body to other people, but he can also do inanimate objects. That's how we saw when Hirohiko was destroying the hotel building with play from Kumayuri. We see him use Suzaku to actually reconstruct the building and put it back like it was never damaged. So this is where we get to see another result of Samura's growth in his true realm, because we see the crow feathers encompass the entire train car, and Yura says the entire train car, impossible. And we see Crow, so he teleported the entire train car. So he's including this inanimate object, even goes for Crow as well. So this just shows Samura's mastery over the Tobimune, and the fact that the true realm does not stay stagnant, because I'm sure he had mastered the blade back during the Seitei War, but clearly he has deepened his understanding, maybe as he's matured, and the kind of journey and growth that he's gone on as an individual and everything with, you know, his daughter, that he's even able to reach another level with the abilities of the Tobe Mune. So this just makes me more excited to see Chihiro's growth with his true realm for the N10. And he teleported the train car all the way up in the air, but we see literally most of his right arm and his right side of his torso has just been completely obliterated by Dragonfly. And Yura is thinking to himself that he was worrying about those civilians, and he took the Dragonfly head on for them. And he states that that's your weakness, Samura. You can't perform great feats without making sacrifices. And we see the centipede spirit energy begin to fill the air around the train car and Samura. And then we get a black goldfish inside the train car. And boom, Chihiro is now teleported behind Yura. And he says, I'll show you. The whole point of the enchanted blades is to save lives. So it's the clashing of the ideologies, where Yura thinks that you need to make these large sacrifices in order to perform great feats, but Chihiro believes that his father and the enchanted blades, their purpose was to save lives. And he thinks to himself that they've provided me with an isolated arena in the sky, so having the train car get teleported up. So now there's no civilians around here, so he just can't let Yura get back down to the ground. But then this is where Yura activates another centipede that he had just been charging up. But then we see Chihiro cloaked in Nishiki. So he's cloaked himself in his spirit energy, and he goes for a stab that is going directly into the shockwave. And he still has the flames of mercy burning on him. So we then see that he has managed to stab Yura through the midsection. But Yura says that you sacrificed your own flesh and staked everything on this strike with enough force to penetrate through Centipede. But you missed my internal organs, so you lost your wager. But this is where Chihiro says that the wager actually comes next. And he yells to Samura saying, your firepower. And the flames light up on Chihiro, but they also encompass Yura as well. And he thinks, me too? And it says, Suzaku's power is healing, not just injuries, but it targets all irregularities in the body. That's how it actually had counteracted the abilities, the effects of Spider, because it's an irregularity in the body. And Yura is wielding powers that are not his own. So if the external powers he's channeling amount to a physical abnormality, they'll burn up and sever Yura and the Shinichi, the Magatsumi. And he said, Chihiro thinks to himself that it's working. We see the black in Yura's eyes begin to crack away, and the flames are just taking over at this point. And this is where chapter 103 ends. And my initial thoughts when I read this was, it's a phenomenal plan. Great idea. But it just didn't feel like it was. It's an extremely viable strategy, but my initial thought was, this probably isn't going to work out. Like, it may get his powers to subside, but something else is going to happen. Because I still, unfortunately, have some pretty serious worries and death flags for Samura. And I just don't know if he's going to make it out of this fight. So I just have this very gnawing feeling that this was not going to be enough to, end the battle. And we'll just have to wait and see, because this is where it leads us to, which is chapter 104. So we are now caught up. This is the chapter just released on Sunday. So the chapter opens up and it's actually Yura's wife. We see a wedding ring on her on her finger, and she asks if dinner is ready yet. And Yura's in the, kitchen cooking it up, saying, almost, hang on. And his wife says that it's so weird because she can't believe things are just back to normal. And the narration says that as we approach 1 month since the end of the war, efforts are underway to build the war-torn areas step by step. Praying for peace, Master Swordsmith Kunishigi Rokuhira vows to enshrine the blades. Oh, this is actually, sorry, not the narrator. This is a radio that is playing on the counter in their kitchen. And this is where his wife actually says, like, all thanks to the war heroes, that things are going back to normal. And Yura actually says, I know, right? And this is where, boom, we cut back to the current time and we see the Swordmaster, and he says that this must be Yura's memory. So he's, through the influence of the Magatsumi, he's now able to see Yura's memories. And he's just thinking to himself that he must have lived in the area that was ravaged by the war. And we get to see Yura again back in the past, and he says, from now on, we can rest easy, knowing that they'll protect this country and all of us, referring to the war heroes, to the enchanted blade users. So he's believing now that the war's over, they're going to use the blades to continue to protect them and this country. And we obviously know that something, is about to happen. But this is where we cut back to the current time, and we see both Chihiro and Yura, and they're falling down from the sky. Flames are blazing, the flames of mercy. And this is where we get the narration, this time actually the narration, saying that only the Shinichi has the ability to transcend its eternal contract, because it's so powerful. And it allows someone who's not contracted to the blade to wield just the very tip of its powers. And the price they pay is that it consumes their bodies. And they know that because of the way the storehouse was collapsing for Kyora, so it was infringing upon his other sorcerer abilities, and that it exhausts their spirit energy, and it forcibly alters the user's body so that it can draw forth more of the Magatsumi's power. And as a result, the more the body is consumed, the greater power that they can command. And the flames of Suzaku repair that ravaged nervous system, which is breaking the tie between the two. And this is where Chihiro actually speaks up and says that Yura is speaking lies, that about the blades being ordered to bring order to the blades being able to bring order to the world. He says that the Hishaku were behind all of it. It's all your fault. You call this the greater good. And he tells him to let go of the enchanted blade. And they end up landing on the ground, and actually it's on the top of a roof as they're falling down. And this is Yura speaking, and he's kind of like huffing through it, but he says, we only made the minimum sacrifices necessary to wield the Shinichi. So everything they've done to this point, they have tried to keep the damage to the public, or the sacrifices, to a minimum. Basically the ends justifying the means, which is never, it's never really the right way to go about things. And he says, like, you think it's all the Hishaku's fault. He says the world's hardly any different from before we began our crusade, that the Rakuzaichi was operating far longer. So he's saying, like, you think it was all us, but these nasty, terrible things were already occurring prior to us even beginning our operation. He says that the Rakuzaichi was at the forefront of numerous illicit organizations that preyed on the defenseless. After the war, when sorcerers became like public knowledge, became visible in the presence of society, that their activities actually furthered to intensify. And he says after the war. So before, this is not, oh look, it was just during the war that these things were happening. He's saying after the war, it got worse with these criminal organizations and these sorcerers that were preying on the defenseless. And he said that for years, people everywhere were exploited and victimized, and it was beyond the Kamunabi's control. Human beings can only do so much. Meaning, even with the Kamunabi there, and he's even the leader of the Kamunabi, said the same thing. There's clans, there's old clans, organizations that just do not respect them, and they do not have the manpower or the resources to be able to encompass all of it and keep it all in check. They're barely keeping balance right now. But this is where Yura says that with the enchanted blades, with the Shinichi, everything could have been different. If the blades had been present, he's thinking that none of those bad things could exist with this power lurking over top of them. And I can see it, I can understand it, but I don't agree with it. And he continues on saying, like, the Hishaku's fault. Who sealed away the enchanted blades? Who held the means of eradicating evil and just disappeared? And he says, your father made the world like this. And you can see in Chihiro's eyes that this actually hit him. This statement hit him deep. Because, like I said, there is some truth to what Yura is saying. And I can just see and feel his pain, because we get to see in the panel above what looks to be his wife on the ground, clearly deceased from something that occurred. And it was after the war. It had nothing to do with the invasion from the inhabitants of Shikoku. This had to deal with just how things were in Japan after the war. And then we see the Swordmaster, but then we see Yura kind of focusing, the flowers blooming up on him, and then Centipede comes out and manages to knock them both away from each other, so he's able to separate himself from Chihiro, thus separating himself from the Flames of Mercy. So it stops breaking his connection with the Magatsumi. He lands, we get this awesome panel of all the flowers kind of spreading where he landed, and Chihiro thinks to himself that it's consuming even more intensely. And whether the Swordmaster uses the Shinichi's power to completely devour Yura's body, or whether Suzaku restores the body and expels the Shinichi's encroachment, hangs in the balance of a tug of war right now. So the Flames of Mercy and the Magatsumi are battling it out right now to see who's going to gain dominion over Yura's body. And Chihiro readies himself and says that he has to stop it. So we see him activate Aka, red, and he says Suzaku. So he's using the absorbed ability, Suzaku, that he gained from Samura. They clash again in an incredible panel of Chihiro bringing the blade down on top of Yura. Yura's blocking it. He's going for Chihiro's head as well. And Chihiro actually got the blade right into Yura's kind of collarbone area, and he finishes the cut going across. They crash into the ground, and Chihiro disengages, and we actually see the Magatsumi land in the ground separated from Yura. And Chihiro thinks to himself that last time Samura cast the flames and he merely ignited them. But this time he stacked it with his own Aka. So it was double the Suzaku from both of them. And Yura is just on the ground, ablazed, fire everywhere. And he's thinking to himself, it's over. He's screaming through the pain, but this is where we actually see the blade. We see some of the flowers kind of burning off of the Shinichi, and we see Chihiro looking very somber. He can see that through Yura's actions and what he's been saying, he can tell that Yura has been through some serious pain in regards to the situation of the country, the enchanted blades. So it's a look of deep understanding, and he's somber. He's beginning to understand Yura, but he's also aware that the actions he's taking are not the correct ones. And he is just, this is where Yura is thinking to himself, like, not yet. And he thinks back to when the swordmaster asked him, "Who are you?" And he said, we were nobody. We were nobody. And he's referring to himself and his wife, but we needed a hero. Which, that is actually really deep. It's incredible. Yura, getting more on Yura and his motivations. I mean, I myself am married, and even just the thought of losing my wife to something that I would deem being preventable would result in some very serious feelings. And you just never know how those things are going to manifest in that situation until you're in it. So it's like, I really do feel for Yura here, but this is where we actually see the swordmaster say, relax. I'll give you your body back. Hand it all over to me. He says, I understand the situation very well. I'll be the hero. And this is where we see Yura basically start to close his eyes. And then we get a shot of the swordmaster laying on the ground in his prison cell. And this is where the flowers and the vines around the Magatsumi grow bigger than the flames. We see Chihiro think it's getting stronger. And then we see Yura's body literally levitate off the ground with all the flowers blooming and the black completely overcoming his eyes. And it's even running down his face. Even though his face is facing upward, it's running down his face against gravity. And this is the first time we get to see the Magatsumi begin to unsheath itself in the blade coming out. And that's where chapter 104 ends. And oh boy, that's literally how I would surmise this. Like I said, great plan from Samura and Chihiro, because it did work. They had Yura basically dead to rights. But they did not anticipate this happening. And it's about to get really bad. I think we are now going to see, because it's the true contracted bearer of the Magatsumi. Now, I still think it's going to be somewhat nerfed because it's not actually his own physical body that is present, but this is going to be on a power level wise, this is going to be higher than anything we have seen thus far in the series, without a shadow of a doubt. So this is where my worry creeps in for Samura, for basically anybody that's not named Chihiro. And so many interesting things could happen, because if the sword bearer is able to, if he knows that Chihiro is Kunishige's son, that could lead to some very interesting dialogue, because we know they were super close with each other, and that's why Rokuhira entrusted him with the most powerful enchanted blade. So it's just, the next chapters are going to be crazy. I'm worried and excited all at the same time. I'd love to hear what you guys think. but it's already been a total yap session. So if you've somehow made it to this point and you watched, like if you just watched 104, thank you. Appreciate you being here. But if you are an absolute mad, crazy person and you watched through from 102 all the way to the end of this, all I can say is you're a beast, and I thank you very much. And I can't wait to continue on this journey with you guys. And as far as the channel goes, I've actually changed my position at work recently, so I'm should be opening up some time in my schedule and mental energy to be able to pour more into a consistent upload schedule again, which I am exceptionally excited for. But that's it on me. Thank you again, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Peace.